do it because I'm not the initial. Oh, you got it. Got it. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. So I just turned my video on. I wasn't able to see myself. Can you all see me okay?
Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Okay, all right, all right. Well, I'm really particularly touched and honored to be speaking to the students at the Pennington School. I attended the Pennington School. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a second, but I want to start off by sharing a few thoughts about where I am, because I'm speaking, if you're a group of individuals who are literary, interested in literature, and a member of the Pennroyal, I would assume as the members of the Pennroyal Literary Club you are, raise your hand if you're not. Okay, nobody raised their hand. So you're all, oh, you're not interested in literature. Okay, well, then you're suffering and you have to put up with this, with my presentation. But I wanted to start by, oh, I'm on a big screen I see there. I wanted to start by talking just a moment about the city of Paris, where I am, because for those who are interested in literature, it's a very special place. And I want to start with a quote from my first novel, Hearts on Fire, Paris, 1968, in which I wrote that for 2 centuries, Paris was where young American artists and directors had sought an inspirational rite of passage, drawn by the intoxicating appeal of the ancient city, which had served as the cultural, political, and scientific capital of the old world. And then this is the character Robbie Sandberg talking. I reveled in the powerful mystique of the lost generation, the Paris of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck, Ezra Pound, Sherwood Anderson, Waldo Pierce, Sylvia Beach, T.S. Eliot, Gertrude Stein, and more. The epic may have changed, the character says in this novel, but the allure lived on, no less strong a gravitational force than in generations gone by. Paris was a place I needed to go, even if I could not fully understand why. Perhaps it was the writer in me searching for inspiration, or the nascent political activist craving historical perspective, but mostly it was a place to escape an America that felt increasingly in disarray. Now, that character who said that in the novel was speaking in the year 1968, which is long before any of you can remember, but it was a year of particular challenge and difficulty in America. And so when you think about being in Paris, where I'm speaking to you from, you also think about what some of the writers have said about this city. Henry Miller in The Tropic of Cancer famously wrote, "God knows when spring comes to Paris, the humblest mortal alive must feel that he dwells in paradise." Now there's somebody smitten with the city. Although I'll tell you, if you read on in his works, he also said some critical things about the city. Hemingway in A Movable Feast wrote, "There is never any ending to Paris, and the memory of each person who has lived in it differs from that of any other. We always return to it. Paris was always worth it, and you received return for whatever you brought to it. But this is how Paris was in the early days when we were very poor and very happy." You may have remembered some of those. Well, you wouldn't have remembered, but if some of you have seen the remake of the movie Sabrina, which was originally with Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, again, 2 actors before your time, those lines were sort of incorporated in that film. So the city that I'm speaking to you from is very special, but I want to move on because I'm here to talk a little bit about both myself and share some thoughts with you about what I'm doing. And I wanted to start by, in this next phase of what I'm to tell you, with how I became an author, because it relates to where you are. The moment, if I trace back in my life, the moment I decided I would devote myself to becoming an author, it was at Pennington School. It was in I think the 9th or 10th grade. My English teacher was Mr. O'Brien, and he gave us an assignment to write a story, and I wrote a short story called Fog. And he made a very kind comment in the story. And when I think back, I think that moment was the moment where I discovered how much I enjoyed writing. And I can trace back if I trace back the joy I feel from working with words, I trace it back to that experience at the Pennington School where you all are. And if I have any advice for you today, it's that if you're in the literary club because you have discovered at this point in your life you have a passion for writing or for literature, I encourage you to stay with it, to stick with it. And there will be in life, in my experience and probably that of others who may be watching, always things that will get in the way. There's always things that will try to get between you and the passion you may feel to become a writer, to become an author, to study literature, to teach literature. And if you do find yourself in that position, you can quote Bill Pearl as having admonished you to find a way to stick to it, to get back to it. Writers have to write. It's really that simple. It's a lesson I've had to learn in my life, and I just share that with you. My first experience, not my first experience, because I was here as a student in 1968, but my first experience coming back to Paris as a writer was in 1978. And Christina, you mentioned there was an interest in poems. So I pulled a poem out from my first chapbook of poems that I wrote in 1978. And I want to share it with you. It's called Candles. And it goes like this. I wrote this in January of 1978. We are born and we die as the candle, a soft, waxy wonder melting slowly down, spilling light onto the world around. The brighter the light, the faster the demise, a steady flame, the sign of the wise. We hear from any stranger or our friends, don't burn your candle at both ends. All know how fragile is the flame before the blowing wind or driving rain. The brightest candle, fearing darkness most, hastens to the shadows of its unwanted host, too hot that melts the love that only knows the warm, too bright blinds the eye of understanding torn, as each day some die snuffed by hurried din, while others gently drip along to sweet oblivion. No damage done when candles flicker and expire. New torches take their place, aglow with certain fire. That was a fun poem to write, and I have fond memories of that period in Paris many years ago when I wrote it. So why am I here today? I'm here today because I'm in Paris. I have a new novel, it looks like this, that's published here in France by a French publisher called L'Armeton. And I'm here actually to develop a plan for marketing the book. France has its own version of Goodreads. Have all of you heard about Goodreads? All you know about Goodreads? It's a website for readers, and readers share what they read in there, and they make comments about it. If you don't know about it, you probably will, or maybe most of you do. I can't see all of you. I have a sign here on my desk. I can't. My view is probably not the best one. Let me see if I can figure out. Maybe that's better. Now I can see everybody. But anyway, so I'm here to establish a relationship with the French version of Goodreads, which is called Babelio, and to develop an audiobook, working with my publisher here. And also I'll be visiting some bookstores. This is all in preparation for returning in March to actually launch the book. It's available on the web now, but really the launch will be in March when I return. And there's a lot of work involved in that. Being an author today, it's a very competitive environment, always has been, and it takes obviously the stick-to-itiveness to write the book, to get it right, to get it of a high enough level of quality to feel good about launching it, presenting it to a publisher. But then you have to market it. You have to participate in more than just the act of writing if you want to have people read and find you and develop a following. There's a lot of marketing involved there, and things that traditionally, certainly back in the Lost Generation time, were not part of what authors thought about. But today you have to. So that's what I'm doing here now. And finally, I think, if you have a curiosity about what the book is about, I'll share with you a video promotional piece I just did, and say another word about this. Is the Mission in Paris book, and it's really a book about reconciliation. It's a novel, of course, and like my first book, it's an historical novel. But I try to use the experience that I had in my family with my own father. We were in business for many years. We passed through some really tough times, not understanding one another. And I really wanted in this book to kind of develop, I wouldn't call it a roadmap. You don't think about these things when you're writing a story, but I ultimately ended up creating a vehicle, the purpose of which, if there is one, is to teach about the importance of reaching out to those who are different from you, and understanding that it's possible to reconcile. And therefore, when I had to write a little promotional piece for the book, which I literally did in about 10 seconds, I'll read it to you. That's what came out of me. That's what I thought. I said in my video, I did it in French and in English, but I wrote, in a world where there is too much hate, too much misunderstanding, where people hide in their groups behind their beliefs, this is a story about the importance of coming together, healing, and giving up the safety of being right, of having to be right. It's a story about reconciliation within ourselves and among ourselves, in our families, our organizations, and among nations, because the context of the story is the peace process between the United States and Vietnam following years after the end of the Vietnam War. So it's also a story about the true path to peace, and on a multidimensional level. I could read you one more thing. I will read you one more thing. It's my favorite spot in the book that kind of exemplifies that. Robbie Sandberg, the character, Robert Sandberg, he's grown up compared to the first book, and he's having a really tough time getting along with his father. Anybody relate to that? Anybody have a father that's hard to get along with? That's probably not uncommon. Maybe some of you students, maybe some of you adults thinking about it. Well, this character has a tough time getting along with his father. So he asked Mihan, who is the female protagonist in the story, and she's a Vietnamese woman whom he met many years before, and in Paris, actually. He asked her, do you have any advice? I'm going to see my father. We don't get along. Do you have any advice for me? And she looks at him and she stops to think, and she says finally 3 things. And she reaches for his hand and falls silent to further gather her thoughts. And he looks at her and says, all right, what are you going to tell me here? And then she looks at him and says, first, when you see him, take a breath and admit to yourself that you are suffering. He looks back at her. Robbie looks back at her quizzically. Right. What do you mean by this? What are you talking about? And she says, find the courage to tell him or show him. So he looks down. He's still very skeptical. He doesn't understand why she's saying this. He's been really tough on him. Father's been tough on son. And then Mihan continues, then find a way to tell him that he is suffering too. You think he is? Robbie says. I know he is. That's what's below his armor and yours. So we're both victims? Yes. And tell him you need his help. You want to understand him. Robbie says, I'll probably get punished. That's typically what would happen between him and his father. And she says, you will, and you must bear it like you have the pain in your body. He's in the hospital at this point in the book, recovering from a gunshot wound. And he says, and after that, and she says, become a refuge for him so he can become a refuge for you. And he says, you make that sound easy. And she says, it is, Robert, if you open your heart. And then it goes on for a little bit longer, and that's it. So I'm going to stop there, and let's have a conversation about anything I've said or any questions you have. I know we're somewhat limited for time, but I'm happy to, for those who have joined the school or those that, well, I guess it really should be for the students. So students, if you're there, if anybody has anything they would like to say, it could be a question, it could be a statement, whatever you like.
Thank you so much for sharing some excerpts from your book and your poetry and telling a little bit of your story. We really appreciate it. But we were also wondering what activities you did at Pennington that helped shape you into the writer you are today.
Wow. Well, I was the proctor of the day, king of the hill. I had my own car. I was 16. Nobody else had a car. I mean, I was pretty lucky guy in those days. At school, trying to remember whether my interest in writing manifest. Well, I was my interest in books manifest in the work I did in the library. The librarian of the day was Mr. Liefeld, and he needed to start a paperback bookstore in the library. Probably doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it hasn't for many years, but he and I worked together and we developed this little rollout, sort of a rollout bookstore. And you could open it up like an accordion. And I would go to the library several times a week at prescribed hours, had a cash box, and students would come and buy books. And I guess that was part of my love for books showing up. The other thing I did was we used to have, and you tell me if you have it anymore, I don't know if you do, but we used to have at Pennington a contest called the Ronan contest and the Declamation contest. And I would enter those contests each year. I think one of them you wrote your own piece, and the other you read someone else's piece. And unfortunately, I never came in first place. I managed to not win, but I always enjoyed it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the people on this call, I see Bill Balderson's name. I think he won one year when I participated, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a long time ago.
It was a declamation contest.
What's that?
It was a declamation contest.
Declamation.
Yes, and I gave the speech from All the King's Men, the Huey Long.
There you go. I don't remember what I gave, but in any event, those are the ways in which I participate. I think that what I would say to the student who asked that question, and again, I can't see the students individually. I don't have a very good view. I see the individuals around, but not the students. I kind of wish I could, because to see your faces would mean something to me. But the point I was going to make is that if you find yourself wanting to make time in your schedule, and there's always, of course, other things in your schedule, from academics to athletics, et cetera. But I would encourage, if you have a passion for words, a passion for writing, do it in each moment that you have an opportunity to put it into your life and to make it part of your life. Seize that opportunity. That's what I would tell you. I'm not sure that I always did that. In fact, for many years I didn't. So I'm giving advice that I didn't necessarily follow myself. And that's why I say it with the conviction that I do. Writers have to write, and speakers have to speak. And so do these things. If you're afraid, do it anyway. Don't let fear get in the way. It's always going to be there. Don't let fear get in the way. Follow your passion.
I have a question. Can you share a little bit about how you got your poetry out there? Did you submit individual poems to magazines, or You have your chapbooks and how they were published.
Yeah, my the first experience I had with that comes back to the city of Paris. In '68, there was a group of students that used to meet over at the American English language bookstore, Shakespeare and Company. And I don't remember the name of the student who put it together, but a group of students put together a magazine called Paris Voices. And that was the first time I ever had a poem published. It was one of the poems in the chapbook that I sent to Christina, that you're welcome to, if you haven't gotten it, or she has it as an attachment to an email. But one of those poems, it wasn't the one I read today, but another one, I think, was called The Incident, I think. But so I that was the first time I was published. And then we had a wonderful reading at Shakespeare and Company. And that's, again, if you look at the history of that store and the people that created it way back, and I guess trying to think of the origins of Shakespeare and Company, go back to Sylvia Beach days, or maybe before, I don't remember exactly, but it was a very cool thing even in 1968. But after that, I didn't write too much poetry. My life took a different turn. I went into business. I joined a family business with my father, and owned and operated a radio station in Florida for 20 years. And my writing there manifests in the form of advertising writing. I had a little ad agency that I did. I would run the radio station by day, and at night I took home all the copy. Usually radio station owners hire someone to do this, but I wanted to do it myself. So I would take the copy home, and half the night I would develop really creative ads, ad campaigns. The next morning I'd go in, and the air personalities and I would join them a lot of times, because we needed multiple people to act out the parts. I would do that. I wrote several award-winning chapbooks in Florida through an organization called Poets of the Palm Beaches. They were published as chapbooks, but not in literary magazines. And I probably let myself down there because I did not make the time to send the poetry that I did write to the outlets that you could send them to. It was a somewhat complex process back a while ago. Now it's probably all been, put onto the computer and onto the internet, but in those days it wasn't. So I probably didn't do what I could have done to make my own poetry more widely viewed. Does that answer your question well enough?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? How many of you have read the book? Huh?
We did all sort of browse through the books, but I don't think anybody had the time to read them cover to cover.
Oh, that sounds like the challenge of the moment, doesn't it? See, that's why I'm doing audiobooks. I did an audiobook for the English language version of the book, and we're just launching it now, actually, but I'm doing one in France because I think people have such constraints for time these days. And I guess it starts if it's true in Pennington, it'll be equally true, I promise you, when you get to university and when you get out into your life beyond that, because we're living in a world where I like to call it the over-communicated world. We're all sort of the benefiting by, benefiting by this, and also the victim of it, because we have so much coming at us. It's sometimes overwhelming, and it's really kind of a tough thing to create the time. When you think about it, in past days, someone would curl up with a book like this, or like this. I just found this book in a bookstore. It's in French. It's a new book about it says Le Paris des écrivains américains from 1919 to 1939. It's a new work on the period that I opened by telling you about, and it's in French. And like you, I just perused it, went through, found some wonderful things. But I'll tell you the most exciting thing about it so far. I shouldn't say the most exciting thing, because there's a lot in it that's great, I saw. but I realized for the first time I can actually read a book in French and understand it. I just never really thought about that before, but as I was reading this with such interest, I said to myself, or I realized, hey, I'm understanding this and I'm reading it in French, and that was kind of a neat moment for me.
Did you take French at Pennington, or did you like pick that up as you started to?
No, I took French at Pennington for sure. I took French at Pennington very much so, and enjoyed it. That's where I started my French education, and then I continued it. Yeah. I make reference to the teacher I had with a different name in my first novel, because she was wonderful. She had an amazing accent, and she always complimented me on my accent. And so I kind of stole that and put it into the book in the character of Robbie Sandberg, among many things. So, but yeah, I took French at Pennington. Are you all taking, anybody in the room taking French? What's that? What's the laughter mean? I can't see your faces, so I can't really tell what you're.
Big no.
A lot of studying Spanish instead.
Huh?
Spanish.
A lot of Spanish, German.
German.
German. Okay. Well, hey, there's more than one language out there. Go for it. Go for it.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So at Pennington, are there any Pennington book clubs or like that? Because we're planning to start one, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for it. Because it's people are all so busy in life, but it still feels important to make time to read outside of class.
Well, first I congratulate you on that thought, and I hope you'll take the thought and run with it. I don't think, I can't remember quite honestly if there was a book club in in the 60s when I was a student, 60, I guess through 65. I graduated in 65. But to get together with like-minded people and focus on a book, all read it, talk about it, learn from it, share from it, grow from it. This is a powerful thing to add to your life and to the lives of everybody that participates. It doesn't get any better though. It opens the whole world, which is something you can do by reading and by books. So I would encourage you to do it. Coordinate it with whomever you need to at school, because obviously you don't do things like this without coordinating it through the proper channels and processes at school. But I think it's a good thing. I think it really is a good thing. Tell me about the Pennroyal Literary Club. Don't you guys, if you have a literary club already, isn't that a reading club or not?
I think our Pennroyal Club is more of a lit mag, so it's based on student submissions, and then throughout the year we sort of shuffle through them, and then in June or later in the year we'll publish something, and it's really fun. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Nice. Still, that's and is that something open to all grades, 9th through 12th, or is it something just for juniors and seniors, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's school-wide, and I think we're starting to integrate more middle school submissions as well. And this year we're trying to make a move to do more languages, so we can have more than just English.
Oh, cool. Nice. Very nice. Any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of what you said suggests that you do write from a lot of your own experiences. Do you find that it comes naturally to write from a place that you know versus kind of completely craft something from the imagination?
Wow. So your question is, I didn't get, I know where you were going, but I didn't get the full question. Say again what your question was, please.
Do you find it more natural for yourself to write from a place that you know, your own experiences, versus to completely craft something from your imagination?
Uh, well, the way I would characterize that in answering your question is that your experiences, at least for me, my experiences, are the raw material that I then use to create the story. So in a sense, it's fantasy. It is made up. It is made up out of whole cloth, and at the same time, it's rooted in life experiences that I've had that become the raw material, sort of like the fuel to the fire, like the frame that holds up the structure. Yeah, sort of, I guess. Yeah, so I mean, there's so many types of writing. There isn't one way. There are people and there are artists who write totally divorced from their personal experience, who write in the fantasy genre, the science fiction genre, whatever it might be. But I think if you, I have a certain prejudice here. I'll share it with you. I think strong stories have to touch people at a human level, and if that's the case, then pulling from your own experiences is a powerful way to gain raw material to create. And to me, it's important to be able to move people, to touch people, to be able to have people feel from reading what you've created, no matter what the context is. So it comes to me that brings things back around to experience being one of the things that you use, that I use. Again, I shouldn't generalize because there are so many approaches and so many authors and so many different ways perhaps to approach this. I'm just answering you from my perspective.
No, thank
Is
you.
that-
That was a great answer.
Okay, well, good. Any other questions? Any other?
I have a question. Like, sometimes when I write like a story, if I want to like craft into like a longer kind of story, and then I have a strong idea to start with, and then I started to get lost in the process of like writing the novel or something. Like, do you have advice? Should we like plan every plot line before we start, or should we just go with like how our heart flows? But sometimes there's a point when the flow stops and then your story just stopped, and I don't know how to do about that.
Let me share that there is no one way. There are some authors who write brilliant, cogent pieces, and they would not be caught dead outlining a thing. Outlining is anathema to them. They simply get into the mode, they write and they create and they move the story along as they create. Some writers. Other writers would look at that and say, no, that way does not work for me. I need to outline my plot points. I need to summarize my characters. I need to put on, do in advance, put in advance the structure to the story. I need to have it structured before I write. I don't think there's one way. I think that you have to find the way that you're comfortable with. And if in the course of that discovery you're uncomfortable, welcome to the world of being an author. It isn't easy. It's very hard. And that is one of the hardest things. That is one of the things that can really be difficult when you're in a story and you had an idea that sort of feels like it's working, and then you find yourself lost. You aren't quite sure where to go next, what the character might do next, or what circumstance to introduce to keep the plot line moving, to keep the story moving. And welcome to the world of being an author. It's hard. And I would just say one more thing to that. That is that it's important to understand that writing, and particularly novels, is a process. You don't sit down and write it. You write it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it and you give it out to editors you trust, that hopefully you have group that you work with and you get their comments back and you rewrite it again, because you can't possibly create a world like you need to create that's interesting, that flows right, that has all the aspects of a good read, that's enjoyable, without really doing that kind of work. It's work. It's just work. And the manner in which you approach it can vary and can be legitimate both ways. There is no one way.
I think we might be out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Can we do a quick round of applause?
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much. I want to send each of you my best wishes for lots of joy in your writing and in your love for literature. And hello to Pennington, because I've got some great memories of the school where you are. It was a good experience in my life. So I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye-bye. Bye,
Great
guys.
job.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, Melissa. I
Great
recognize
job. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy Paris.
Thank you. Thank you.